my friends? Welcome back to the www.PlaidAvenger.com, where we just don't want to hear the news. We want to understand the news. And the news that has Turkey in a tizzy this week is a US Congress subcommittee vote to recognize something called the Armenian Genocide of 1915. What? 100-year-old act committed in eastern Turkey is somehow up for debate in the US Congress? Indeed it is. And it's infuriating Turkey, a very strong US ally and NATO member and possible EU member. And thus it has international impacts. What? This is so crazy. And lots of folks have actually written into the Avenger saying, dude, what's going on with this? Did Turkey commit a genocide? Is this real? What's the background? How is it going to impact the relations between these two powers today? Those are all excellent questions, which the media, of course, will not answer for you. That's why you come here to the Plaid Avenger. Let's entitle this one, Turkish Tantrum over US Genocide Vote. Now, for starters, what's this vote deal all about? Well, a subcommittee of the House of Representatives, a subcommittee, passed this resolution narrowly. I think it was 26 to 24, passed this resolution to recognize the Armenian thing that occurred in 1915 as a genocide, as the Armenian Genocide. Now, that don't mean it's passed. That means it's going to the House floor, and then they'll vote on it, and maybe amend the bill, then it's got to go to the Senate, then they got to get a bill together, then it goes to the President, and if the President of the U.S. signs it, then the U.S. will officially recognize the Armenian Genocide of 1915. I'm suggesting to you, not gonna happen for reasons that we'll wrap this podcast up with. Now, what is the story behind this? Why would the U.S. Congress be voting on this? And why would the Turks be pissed off about it? Why would the U.S. even care about it? Well, it's all hinging on this term genocide. Okay? So let's put this in context now. That's what's going on in the U.S., and Turkey has already voiced its dissent and actually just threw a temper tantrum. The Turkish Prime Minister Recep Erdogan, love Recep, he's a good guy, he's a solid leader, immediately came out and said, this is terrible, you guys are going to trash our relations. So what's the deal here with this supposed genocide? Why does it cause so much fury and angst between countries? This act, which no one disputes, this act actually occurred, all right? Did occur perhaps 1915, 1916, or 1915 to 1918, depending upon your historical source, and it was perpetrated against Armenian peoples. Okay, well, who are Armenian peoples? Armenians are an ethnic group, like Russians or Turks, and the Armenians, back at this time period, the peoples were located in the eastern side of the Ottoman Empire, not Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. Now, Armenians, again, an ethnic group, they have another unique characteristic about them, is they're Christian. Now, why would I say that's unique and point it out? Because the Turks, obviously, are Turkish Muslim folks in the Ottoman Empire. So the Armenian Christians, they actually got a lot of play. Even like 100 years ago, there were folks in the U.S. Christian missionaries, and even U.S. lawmakers, and even U.S. presidents that 100 years ago knew about this situation and were compelled to act because of the Christian link. I'm not overplaying it. I just want you to understand why it's getting play in the United States. There is this tie between Christian U.S. and the Christian Armenian folks, which gets a lot of leverage for the Armenians in the U.S. Congress 100 years ago, but even today. So these Armenian Christians located in what was the Ottoman Empire in the eastern side, and the Ottoman Empire at the time controlled, big chunks of what we call the classic Middle East. Saudi Arabia, they controlled, Lebanon, what's now Israel, Iraq, and even the borders up to Iran and the borders up to Russia in the Caucasus Mountain regions. And as this empire disintegrated, the Armenians actually kind of got their own state. They called it Armenia. Surprise! But then they were kind of gobbled up very quickly by the Soviets when the Soviet expansion under the Russians became part of the USSR. And it wasn't until the Soviet implosion of 1991, where the Soviet Union went away, that Armenia, as a modern state, sprang up. So 1991, you have Armenia, sovereign state in today's world. Ever since then, Armenia has been pushing the world to recognize this Armenian genocide of 1915. Okay, so that's the background. That's Armenians. When did this happen? 1915, 1916. Where did this happen? I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but it's important. Where did it happen? It happened in the Ottoman Empire, not Turkey. Because if you think back to our previous Plaidcast on Turkey, you know that the modern state of Turkey did not get recognized or evolve until 1923. This is the last heyday of the Ottoman Empire during this period, the Ottoman Turkish Empire. And they were disintegrating, they were corrupt, they were weak, they were backwards, they were behind the times. They sided up with the Germans in World War I, and as a result, they were getting completely wiped out and trashed by 1915. At the end of World War I, they were being invaded by the Russians, who were trying to gobble up more territory, and eventually did. So they're being under attack. The European colonial powers are coming in to pick off pieces of them and take it over into modern states that you know of today, like White Iraq and Lebanon and Egypt. So the Ottomans were, even after the war, kind of being carved up and really fighting to maintain control of the empire that they still had. Of course, the end of the story is what's going to be the remnants of this fight is now modern-day Turkey in 1923. But we're talking about this period before, actually, independence in 1923. So during this very chaotic, being invaded by multiple parties, is when this genocidal act did occur. And again, I'm going to continue to apologize. I'm not trying to offend my Turkish friends or underplay to my Armenian friends. All sides, though, do agree that some wholesale massacre did occur. Lots of Armenian folks did die during this period. Even the Turks don't deny it. This is not a denial thing. This isn't a Holocaust denial. It's really what was going on and how are we going to define it. So all parties do recognize lots of Armenians died. The Turks, for their part, say it was like 300,000 to 600,000 Armenian dead. The Armenians say, oh no, the number's closer to 1 million to 1.5 million of Armenians slaughtered. Most historians, of course, are somewhere in between. So everyone agrees this happened. It's all about the how it happened and the why it happened is what the dispute about in today's world is. Let me give the Turks' side of the story first. The Turks say, hey, look, it was the Ottoman Empire, it was crumbling, attacked from all sides, and those Armenians were siding up with the Russians. The Armenians were trying to form an independent state and tear off from the Ottoman Empire, and they sided up with the Russians and were helping the Russians. And therefore, during this chaotic period, this was not a genocide. We weren't trying to kill all the Armenians, but these were war dead. They got into the way, they were helping the Russians, therefore they were enemies of the state. And so yes, a whole bunch of Armenian people did die, but they were war dead. It was not a systematic slaughterhouse to try to purge out all Armenian culture. Of course, the contrary argument from the Armenians is, yes, yeah, it was, all right? Yes, you did round us up. There were death camps, just like in the Holocaust in Germany. There were places where people were rounded up and killed. Armenians were put on death marches where they were just marched out into the deserts of Syria to die. Again, not a lot of this is up for dispute. But the Armenian angle is, this was done intentionally to kill every single Armenian and therefore distinguish Armenian culture in an attempt to keep your state together. Do you see the difference in the viewpoints? No one's disputing the death. No one's disputing the circumstances around the death. But the Turks and the Armenians are disagreeing about the motivation behind that death. Does that help you understand the conflict a little bit better from the get-go? Okay, well, let's back it up then. This was 95 years ago. Why now? Why now, 2010? The U.S. Congress is voting on this because this particular genocide, if it is indeed going to be called that, is very important. It is perhaps the second most infamous and studied and documented genocide in human history, second only to the Jewish Holocaust, the Jewish genocide under the Nazis. It is also the first genocide, if it's going to be called that, the first genocide of the modern era, as occurred in the 20th century. It is well studied, it's well documented, people on all sides heavily and hotly dispute it still in today's world. And what's the Armenian angle on why this should be recognized 100 years later? They say, dudes, genocide's bad, it's bad, kids, and it is. And you need to recognize that this event occurred. One, for closure for our Armenian peoples. But more importantly, so that people don't forget. You can't, if you wipe out history and relabel it, then it's prone to happen again.